What celebrity death seems a bit too suspicious? Hang Inger. Oscar and Golden Globe winner for The Killing Fields. Cambodian and former prisoner of the Khmer Rouge. Tortured and imprisoned in Cambodia. Murdered outside his home in Los Angeles. His family thinks it was revenge from Cambodia for his outspoken support for human rights and bringing people to justice in Cambodia. Survived genocide, murdered anyway. JFC. Kem Lay. Supposedly murdered by a poor rice farmer who had loaned him thousands of dollars. Complete nonsense. He was murdered because he published articles showing how much wealth was being stolen from the Cambodian people by the ruling elite. See also Chutwadi and Chia Vicky. Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones died under suspicious circumstances while swimming. The person he was swimming with, a contractor working on his house who Jones had accused of stealing from him, supposedly confessed on his deathbed to killing Jones. I read an article about the incident and how there was a wild party that night at Jones' home. A neighbor down the road claimed in the early morning hours, she heard a bunch of screams coming from the direction of Jones' house, then a minute or two later saw or heard a couple of cars with tires squealing zooming away from Jones' house. I think the coroner ruled the cause as death by misadventure, but something has never sat right with me on that one. Jill Dando. She was a British TV presenter, newsreader and journalist. She was shot on her front door step and it's never been solved. Also Dr. David Kelly, not exactly a celebrity, but he was a known public figure. He was a weapons expert that supposedly killed himself shortly after saying that the report on Iraq's nuclear weapons had been fudged. Yes, David Kelly. Who managed to take 29 pills and slit his wrist with a pruning shear while somehow not leaving a single fingerprint of his own on either the blister pack or the knife. Right after making public a report that was very damning to the UK government at the time. That very plausible suicide. Ken Lay, former Enron CEO. Was declared deceased in Aspen with his family right before he was going to serve his sentence. Cremated and buried at an undisclosed location. Man is living on an island having the time of his life. If I recall correctly, his wealth was about to be confiscated as well, but since he was legally declared deceased it all went to his family instead. The timing of his death is and was highly suspicious. George Reeves, the guy who played Superman in the 50s. There were a bunch of people in his house the night he died, and a lot of conflicting stories. Also he was having an affair with a studio exec who was in attendance with his husband that night. Also forensics disagree with the testimony of the witnesses. It's all a clusterfuck. I've always wondered about this one. Like, he had valid reasons to be very depressed. But everyone's differing stories and his involvement with Tony Maddox was suspicious. I thought Ben Affleck did a great job of playing him in Hollywoodland. Elliott Smith. Arguing with his girlfriend and then when she goes to take a shower in the middle of their argument, he suddenly decides to stab himself twice in the chest with no hesitation wounds. And of course she pulled the knife out before calling 911. And I think I've read she has exhibited so weird behavior before and since. The live version of King's Crossing from the Echo where his sister yells, "Because we love you," after he sings, "Give me one good reason not to do it," always makes me tear up. They added it to the studio version on From a Basement on the Hill. Brittany Murphy for sure. Didn't her husband die in almost the same way soon after? And her mother was staying at her house when she died. Then, when her husband died 5 months later, he and her mother were sharing a bed. To comfort each other. I'm not saying her mom did anything to harm her, but that really made me pause. I've always been convinced that the whole thing was a creepy/disturbing Munchausen by proxy situation with the husband. He was a mentally unstable conman and she was incredibly vulnerable when he came into her life. Marilyn Monroe's death. I just read 30 minutes ago that the current owners of her last house are trying to tear it down, but there is a temporary hold stopping it for now. Everything about her death makes me sick. I hated hearing about how her body disappeared for a little while. You prob don't want to hear about what happened after she was buried, then. Some guy, I think famous, or maybe just rich, had himself buried in a coffin above hers, with his body facing down so that it's like he was lying on top of her. That truly disturbs me. What a fucking creep. Epstein. A bit? How about a lot? It's one of the few conspiracy theories that actually make sense. Dude spends his whole life blackmailing rich and powerful people with damning things. After being caught and brought to justice, while waiting trial in his cell, every single camera around his cell goes out and both the guards fall asleep simultaneously while he kills himself. That's what an actual conspiracy looks like. Natalie Wood. She had a horrible fear of water, and yet they want you to believe that she got into a dinghy by herself in the middle of the night when it was pitch black and she was wearing her nightgown. Yeah, this happens all the time. I'm still hoping that Christopher Walken speaks up about it while he's still with us. If he hasn't by now, he won't, and most likely because it would possibly incriminate him. Whitney Houston and her daughter. Whitney's autopsy shows that she had defensive wounds. Maybe it wouldn't be as suspicious if her daughter wasn't also found unresponsive in a bathtub. I was more shocked by her daughter's death than Whitney's, which was also shocking. Very suspicious that the daughter died the same way her mother did, but much younger, 3 years later. First time I hear of her daughter's death or any controversy regarding Whitney's. So, what does the rumor kitchen say? Whitney's brothers had placed Bobby under a conservatorship to try and control the money. Whitney's will was written to say Bobby would get the money in periodic installments, or if she was dead as well it would go all in a lump sum to her brothers. Common theory is the brothers killed Bobby to get all the money now. I remember hearing about Michael Jackson saying people were following him not long before he died, but that could be due to mental health problems/drug use. Kinda weird he was with the only doctor in the world who didn't know CPR or 911. MJ was hella thin and had been taking surgical anesthetics which basically put you in a mini coma as a sleeping aid every night for months. He's lucky he lived as long as he did. Not administering CPR or calling 911 to me isn't shit next to administering that shit to him to begin with. Reminds me of what Robin Williams said about propofol. He took propofol to sleep, which is like doing chemotherapy because you're tired of shaving your head. Ivana Trump. On the eve of her non-disclosure agreement about her marriage, divorce, and what she knew about the Trump business set to expire. Why was her casket so heavy? I loathe DT, but casket weight doesn't seem that weird to me. If it was solid wood, depending on the species, it could have easily weighed way more than a cheaper wooden casket. Problem was, Trump loathed her. He spent as little as possible. Look at her grave before the added headstone at Bedminster Golf Course in New Jersey. The original stone was overgrown and people complained enough that they cleaned it up with a bigger stone.